Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inflectra's test automation series called UI Automation 101, where we will be exploring how to best automate interactions with basic UI features. You are joining us for our second webinar in the series, and today's topic is tables, grids, and trees. Today's webinar will be presented by Alexey Grinevich, a senior software developer at Inflectra. He holds a doctorate in applied mathematics and has been working in the IT industry for the past 20 years. For the last 10 years, his major interests have been automated testing, legacy APIs, and desktop system testing. My name is Teresa, and I'll be your moderator today. Before I turn it over to Alexey, let's cover a few housekeeping issues. Today's webinar will last for about an hour and will consist of both theoretical and practical parts and end with a Q&A session. We ask that you save your questions until that time and use the built-in questions tab to send questions. These will then be read out and answered. Today's webinar will be recorded. In a couple of days, we'll make the webinar recording available on Inflectra's YouTube channel under the playlist called UI Automation 101. Links to each webinar recording will be emailed to you a few days after the live webinar, or you can subscribe to Inflectra's YouTube channel to get notified when new recordings become available. To give you a little bit more information about the webinar series as a whole, UI Automation 101 is a 5-part series focusing on different aspects of UI design. A key component to successful test automation is understanding and aligning the UI interaction points and capabilities with the test automation tool strengths. During this 5-part series, we will focus on specific aspects of UI design. This series is running in parallel with our webinar series titled MS Dynamics UI Testing. This UI Automation 101 series is an excellent companion to that series. For those of you not familiar with our test automation webinars, we recommend that you check out our previous 2 series, Test Automation Demystified and Planet Test Automation First Steps, both of which are available on our YouTube channel. Last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, each webinar in the series has a practical part. We will demonstrate the key practical test automation concepts using Inflectra's own platform, Rapise. If you haven't downloaded the tool yet, please visit www.inflectra.com/Rapise. Feel free to use Inflectra's 30-day free trial. With those items out of the way, I'll turn it over to our presenter, Alexey.
Thank you, Teresa. My name is Alexey, and let's begin with the topics of today's webinar. So the theoretical part today is quite short. We are going to look at trees and we are going to look at tables, grids, which is more or less the same from our point of view. And the majority of this webinar will contain examples. So we need to consider different example application and then summarize what we will notice during this sort of investigation. And we are starting with trees. So basically tree control, and best example of tree control is what you can see on the left in the file explorer. The file tree is something that is tree by nature, is some nested structure when one object is nested with another object and contain all nested children and so on and so forth. So this is a tree, and this is it is represented with a tree control. So we see such tree in many different applications, and we need to deal with them when we need to automate such applications. So let's start from considering a few examples. And one of such examples is coming from the era when Rapise just started. So in like about 12 years ago, what we were doing is we were considering major web libraries, and there was many of them, but far not that many as we have today. And this is one of the libraries from Google, from the times of like 10 years ago. It's GVT-ext. It contains a number of controls that were used to build web applications, and you may see its design is already looking outdated because it's quite old library. And what we were doing while working on RUPEes, we were working with such major libraries, with GVT, with YUI, with jQuery UI, and we were adding support for controls implemented in such libraries. We will building them into the RUPEes. For example, let's take one of the trees here. So it's a tree control. Let me make a new test here and show how we work with it using RUPEes. I'm creating a new test. And it's a web test, and it will be using Firefox browser, and it will be using RWell. This is standard RUPEes test. So what will happen if I just hit record and try doing something with this tree? As you may see, whenever I click on the object, it's recorded as itself. So when I click on the China, it records China and doesn't record the tree. So it doesn't record select China in the tree. It selects the China object. And if I finish recording, what I can see is that I have two objects in the object tree. So they are separate. It's not a tree, it's just leaves of the tree. And this is example of unsupported control. So this control is now not supported with the configuration I have right now. Let me now add something, add a dedicated library that knows something about this control. I'm removing all my recordings and objects recorded so far, and I'm choosing tools libraries because my goal is to add a library that knows about this tree control. This library is GVT-ext. You actually may see here the history of libraries we have. We have DOM jQuery, DOM YUI, and YUI is not supported anymore. We still have it in RUPEes. It's like an archived version. You may still use it, but it's not used in new projects anymore and for a long time. Smart GVT, and so on and so forth. This is like a history of what we had. So I'm adding this library. I'm forcing to add this library. Let me just discard, nothing happened, except the library has been added to the list here, DOM GVT-ext. Let's see what happens now if I try to record. I may click on, again, India, and you see what happens. We recognize the tree, and what has been recorded is click node in the tree, and path to that node is recognized. I may now click China and see it's not recorded as just China anymore, but it's still the same tree. So the same object is used with different recording parameters. And like United States. Let me, okay, click on United States. Finish. It didn't see the first click, but second worked. Okay, so I have these three actions, and if I just play it now, I can see that the three nodes gets clicked in an order that I was clicking them. Now, one tricky thing with this control, if I just collapse something, So this element is not currently visible on the screen. Finland is collapsed, so, and this one is collapsed. What will happen if I play? Let's see. Play now. You see, first it explicitly expands the parent node and then clicks on the node we need. So this is how good support for a tree works. So you don't need to worry about expanding something to get to the control you need and to click on it. So it's expanded by the tree control automatically. Now, one common thing, and it's commonly tricky, is the checkboxes, and this tree has them. So this is United States. It has a checkbox, and unfortunately, if we look at the API for this tree control, there is no method like doSetCheck to mark specific node as checked, unchecked. We have checkable trees in other libraries that have it, but it's not available here because these checkboxes, they are implemented in a custom way. It's not a feature of controls. It's a feature on how this particular tree is implemented. So we don't have common support for this. And in such cases, we, as usual with automation, we have to be creative. So if I work with this tree manually, what I do to check uncheck is I click on this checkbox. Unfortunately, other workarounds like hit on space. Oh, you see space is working, but it's not always working as I remember. If I hit space, yeah, I hit space button right now, but nothing gets checked. So I need a good, reliable way to check or uncheck something. And after working with this control a bit and trying different things, what I found is double click actually sets and resets check with this particular control. So this is a good way on how to deal with it. So how can I use this double click here? So click node here doesn't has option to choose which kind of click to use. This click node doesn't have it. But what I may do, I may note that after clicking on this tree node, the mouse cursor stays over this node. So what I need to set the check is just to send double click after selecting the node. And if I send just single click, it starts editing node. This is not what I want. But if I send double click, it changes the checkbox. So I may just use it for my purpose. So my current purpose is to set checkbox for particular tree node. So after this action, let me add comment. Select node with checkbox, mouse cursor currently points to that node after doing this action. So what I may do, I may just do double click. There is a global object that has method do click. And this method do click has optional parameter, and I may add optional parameters using param toolbar button. And it's a click type. So click type is L, which means single left click. If I change it with LD, that would mean double left click. So if I now play the same script, it's expected that it will uncheck this checkbox as a result of execution. See, first it's selected and then change the checkbox. So this is old good tree and we have good support for it. Let's look at another application that has a tree. This is our demo application that's shipped with rupees. It's a part of VPF test case that you may open from the start page. It's available here. in the bottom of the list of samples shipped with rupees. So you all have it if you wish. So with this application, we also have a tree, and we may try to work with it. So this is a VPF application. So let me make a new test for desktop testing, because previous was web testing. VPF tree 101, and it's a desktop application. And I'm also going to use RL. Okay, let's just hit record and see what we may do with this tree. Select application to do recording, move it to the side so I can see everything. Well, let me expand node 1. And you see the action expand actually gets recorded. Click on the node, and the action recorded with full path to that node. The path contains all elements from the root up to the node. So I may finish this recording and see how it now works. So I may just play it as this. So since the node 1 is already expanded, it should stay expanded. And then it should select the second node. What will happen if I collapse the tree and comment out this expand action? You see that it automatically expands all nodes on the path to the required tree node and then clicks on it. So this helps to make test script like smaller, just one action with path, and I don't need to care about other things. So this is a good support for a tree. We have it as a part of the UI automation library for well-formed trees. And this tree is well formed because it supports actions like expand, collapse. So we may read the state of specific node. We may detect what user did if one just clicks on node, or one tries to collapse or expand node. If we have that information, if Rupees knows that, then Rupees works properly with such a tree. There is another example where we have a tree. It's dynamic nav desktop client. Let me create new test, and we will make a step from the ideal world of the demo application to the reality, to the real production application. It would be nav tree 101 desktop. So just create a new test, so everything is separated. Now let me have a quick look at this nav application. So we have a tree here on the main screen, and I may go to different sections here and select them. So let me try to work with that tree. I hit record. Application is Dynamics nav. And I'm going to go to sales quotes and released sales quotes. So what you may see is for the expand of the sales quotes, I have click node recorded. This means that Rupees was unable to detect my action in terms of if it is an attempt to expand. So I click in this range where I have expand collapse control, or I click on the node itself to select a node. So this means this control doesn't provide such information and RUPEES has to guess. So the guess is user clicks a node. And with this guess, actually, the test is still valid, although for selecting single node, I have two actions. And I will try. So we have these two actions. Let me see what will happen if I execute it. We select sales quotes and we select released. Sales quotes released. Now, what will happen if I remove the first action and try to, let me click somewhere else to see the difference. So I select different node and play this action. What's going on? Let me hide everything so it's available on screen and try to play again. Play. Well, so once it's on the screen, it works. So it was able to click this sales quotes released action. Now, I'm closing this sales quotes to see if it manages to expand. And playing the same. And you see it fails, this action fails. And the reason is that it's unable to automatically expand the sales quotes node to click on the release node. Again, this is because how this particular tree is designed, it doesn't provide such information as expanded collapsed state for a node. So if we follow the path that were recorded by RUPEES initially, that should work. It should expand and do everything as expected. But for us, it's good to know that this tree doesn't support expand collapse, so we have to explicitly expand nodes on its path. So it may be not so good, but for dynamic snap, we don't use this tree for automation. So we do support it for the cases we really need it. But in fact, instead of using this tree, if you remember what we was talking about navigation within application, and this tree is used for navigation, and for dynamic snap, it's much more useful to use this top navigation panel where we may navigate anywhere else by just typing right path. So for test automation, definitely, instead of using this tree, we are using this one. And this solves all our requirements for navigating within this application. So let me try to summarize the collected knowledge about trees. So we reviewed GVT-EXT tree. We reviewed VPF application with its own tree. We don't need it anymore. And it has the best the best tree in terms of available interfaces, where RUPEES may see everything, and it supports this particular tree to best possible level. And we have dynamic snap, which is more real life, and we sometimes need to deal with partial unsupported interfaces, and we need to know how to live in such situations. So to summarize, good tree API must have method like do-click node, and in RUPEES, all supported trees have this. And node path is something that points to specific node, and usually it's a node path like parent, then child, then grandson, and so on and so forth up to the element we are going to click. And it's good when tree has do expand, do collapse, and it's good to know about it in advance. If it's there, then our tests may be shorter because do click node would be able to do everything we usually need. So this is all about trees for now. Now switching to another very common control, we're going to talk about grids and tables. And we will start from another our old friend. It's one of currently available libraries from SAP, for which we have a demo instance running. So SAP library from SAP called OpenUI 5. It's used in SAP HANA Fiori, and it contains its own grid, and we have a library and support for such a grid control. So let me create a new test. Local test. OpenUI grid. It's a web library because we deal with web browser. Okay, 7 previous test, and using RL as a language. Let's see what happens if I record some actions within this grid. You may see that we record the grid products. So we recognize the whole grid, not just this cell I clicked. And the action is recorded. Click on the second column, on the second row within the column product ID. Second row, and index starts from 0, 0, 1, 2, and column product ID. This is where I just clicked. I may click on, say, price. And since this price is unique, I may click on it. Or I may check something here. So it's recorded as row selection toggle. So my actions with this grid are recorded on the high level. So the information on what cell I click is captured as a parameter to the action. So I may easily change it, take it from the external source, and make this test data-driven. So in this case, I assume that we have good support for this grid control for this library. Now, sometimes my actions are good in terms of my intentions. So for example, here I wanted to click on ID of the second product in the table. That could be my intention. And here I click on the price, but I didn't want to click on find the price by its value. I also wanted to use, for example, the row of some number of row. So I may change the type to number and change here it to 2. So I will click on the product ID, and I will click on the price for this product. Actually don't want select row. You may see that again, good grid means all my actions were captured within one object. It didn't produce an object for each cell. This means a good support. So now if I'll play, it clicks on the product ID and then clicks on the price for the second product. Common requirement is to actually read value from the cell. And again, there is an API in the grid that may be used for that, and it's get cell. And here I may, for example, read a price for row, for second row, and for column price. And I may put this price to the output. Tester message price for second product, and use standard approaching rupees. I repeat in this message parameter, so rupees automatically concatenates them, combines them together. And here I will use variable last result. Last result is a result of previous action, which is in this case get cell. So the result read from this cell will be stored in that variable and will be sent to the report. And let me just play it so we can see how it works. So here in the output, I can see the price that were captured from that grid. Okay, we are moving to the next example. Another example is again Dynamics nav. We have it here, and we have a good grid here. For example, items. This is a demo instance, so items is pre-filled. That's why I'm using it. There are tons of grids in the nav, but actually, as we were talking before, usually within one application, if you support one grid, you support all of them because they all use the same object to represent the grid, and we have support for that object in rupees, and rupees may work with any of those grids, enabling recording and playback of your test cases. So I'm creating a new test just as before, create locally, and it would be nav grid 101, and it's a desktop application. And I'm just doing record, choosing an application. Let me select some item by description. And you may see that my action is captured, and the parameter to click cell, so it recognizes the whole grid, recorded action as click cell, and the click is in the column description in the cell containing text touring bicycle. And it works that way. So you may think, okay, it used the text. What if the text is the same? I may click on another cell which gets repeating values that are not unique. So in such situation, it captured my no click, but I can then may choose it to use the raw number after the test is recorded. So this one is not really correct, while this is completely correct. And since in most situations this is what user wants, we record it in that way. We plan to make more advanced recording in the future version of rupees. Otherwise, you may see that the support for this grid is very similar in approach and in level of support to that we have for SAP grid. This is because we are focusing on making a number of major ERP and CRM application to be well supported by rupees. That's why you may see controls are recognized and rupees may play tests with these controls. Although I don't recommend you to just record test this way that I'm currently doing, because we also provide test frameworks for these major applications. So it's better to start from downloading framework where you already have some initial tests designed and work on expanding this test framework. But this is a subject of you already seen that in the previous webinar held by Dennis, and you will see more examples of such frameworks on the parallel webinar series about CRMs and ERP system support that are performed by my colleague Dennis Markovtsev. So you may see the grid is supported to good level with Dynamics nav. We have a grid with do-click cell. It has all essential things like getting number of columns, number of rows, and so on. And now we're going from the perfect part where everything is supported to like more real life use case. What happens if you have custom application? And in many situations, even if you work with predefined application like nav, you have some third-party add-on or third-party application you still have to deal with, and that application may have no dedicated support built into RPs. So I have an example of such an application. So this is a medical recordings recording system. It's for hospitals to store information about patients, about visits, about doctor assignments, and so on. So I'm logging in. And I'm interested in this particular screen where I can try to find a patient. So I'm trying to filter by Liz, and I have a number of patients found in this table. So this is definitely a table. Let's see what happens if I try to record something with this application. I'm again creating a new test, local test. Give it a name, web. Firefox is the browser where I have it opened. And I will use RVL as a language again. So if I just try to do something with that grid, for example, click on Elizabeth Johnson, you may see how my action were recorded. It's not a table click, it's a click on specific cell. So it didn't recognize the table as a more complex object. I have some atomic recording, and as you see, I'm trying to avoid such kind of recording as not reliable, and it's something that makes my tests not data driven, and I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm removing this recording, canceling, going back. Okay, going back to this table, filtering. So I have this table on the screen. If I try to investigate what's going on, what I see is that I have a regular table made from rows and columns using the table HTML element. So you may think why RPs doesn't support such a trivial table element. And answer is very simple. This table element in like 80% of cases is used not for representing actual table, but for formatting information on the screen, for formatting just one cell within the table. So when we tried to add support for such table, we found that recording becomes much less reliable. So by default, RPs doesn't try to recognize such a table. And this table may have some variations on how it is represented on the screen. And even if we support the most basic one, there are still situations that require some tweaking. So what we decided to do is, although we consider it as more advanced case, we may have a library that has generic support for all tables of that kind. And this is the library I'm going to demonstrate you right now. So if we go to Rupees GitHub, Inflectra, GitHub, this is how I usually search for it. There is Inflectra GitHub page, and one of its projects is Rupees Power Pack. And here in the Power Pack, there is a library, DOM meta table, containing a library and description for that, for this library. So I just need to download this library and use in my test. So this is what I'm now doing. I've just downloaded it. Let me go to downloads and extract it here. So DOM meta table. Now I need to copy this lib folder into my test to have this library enabled. I'm going to open folder with my test. Simplest way for that is to switch testing to the files tree. You see this is a files tab and it's a files tree. I click on any file and choose reveal and explore. So this will open my test folder with one file selected, but I just need this folder. Okay. Oh, no, I didn't want to launch it. Go into my DOM meta table with library. And copying the lib from extracted place to the folder with library. Rupees detects a library by presence of lib subfolder that has one or many files with extension JS_lib. This is a library definition file. So I have my library here, but I don't see it here, although this view should reflect the files from Rupees test. So there is a quick way to add them. I click on this view icon here, so it appears. So it shows files that are not included in my test so far with the plus sign. So if I click on plus, the file will be added. So the file I'm going to add is this JS_lib. So I click on this plus sign and file becomes a part of my test. And also I click on metatable.js. Now I'm saving my test and disabling this file view to show only files from within test. So table is now, I can see this table here. I can see this library here in my test project. Again, it's not required. Just presence of the library within the folder would also work for recording, but it's better to see explicitly in Rupees what libraries I have. Okay, this library has special design. If it's here, it's auto loading. I don't need to go to tools, libraries, and enable it because this library gets enabled automatically if it's a part of your test. So what I need is to record this table object to be able to work with it. So I hit record, waiting for my Firefox to show up. It's unable to pop up properly. Too many windows over it. Okay, it's here. So now instead of clicking on it, so just clicking would not work. The magic with this meta table is a bit more tricky. So it requires me to point to the type I want to record and to the root for that type to record. So here in the advanced section, I have simulated learn chooser, and it allows me to choose which type of objects to record. And I'm going to use HTML meta table from the meta table library, from the library I've just added. Now I need to click on this button to start recording or learning object of that type. Just selecting it is not enough. I need to click here to see cancel recording of this type. So now whatever is learned by any way, either by using like learn button or by spy, it will get this type assigned. In my case, I need to use spy because I cannot select the table object. If I click anywhere here, I will definitely touch a table cell and it would be assumed to be a table cell. In my case, I need to use a spy and find the root of this tree. So in spy, I hit track, select something in this tree closer to its beginning, and hit Control T to stop tracking. When I stop tracking, it automatically selects last pointed element here in the tree, and I need to manually find the parent that represents the whole tree. In this case, I clicked on the table cell, which wasn't part of the table header, so I may find the root by just clicking through this path. Okay, this is a cell text. This is the cell border. This is a row of the table. This is the table heat. It doesn't have, it's not selected for some reason. Okay, it's selected the same as row. And finally, here is the whole table represented by the table tag. And this is something I'm going to learn. So I double click on this element right here. And XPath for that element is represented, is put into this XPath field. So now if I hit learn, it will learn an object of that type. Or I may hit this learn, whatever. So I hit learn, and whole table gets learned, and the type of the learned object is HTML meta table, and this is the type from the library. I hit finish, and I have my table now here in the object tree. I may discard recording because I didn't have any actions. I had just learn, and I can see this table here. So the trick of this meta table is that besides the locator, that's in the case of the web object is just an XPath, it has a number of parameters. These are relative XPath statements that help finding different table-related things within this table root. And these may be changed for an object. So these are set for generic and usual table represented as regular table. And I can just try to see if that works for my table. So I may try to, for example, use click cell. It has a number of parameters, but if I look at the documentation, that was here, only first two parameters are required. And if I do click cell and specify only row and column, the rest will be selected by default, which means left click and click in the center of the cell. So what I can do, I can remove optional parameters, only leaving default ones. And I can click on the cell, for example, since it supports string or number, so it may try to find a column and row by text. I may simply tell it to click cell like Elizabeth Johnson within the column name. Let me try to change that. So string Elizabeth Johnson in the column name. Saving it and playing it. And you may see it managed to click Elizabeth. I need to go back. So it has a number of APIs, and for this grid design, table design, they work in the way as this table is specified. For your custom tables, this may need some tweaking. But this is a general purpose grid, and one useful thing it has is do-click text. This method has just one parameter, just one required parameter. It's a text to click. So I don't specify column name. I may just say do-click text Elizabeth Johnson. It would search through all the cells within given grid. I may just change it with something like Elizabeth Moore, so we can see the difference. I'm removing this click, and here I'm going to use Elizabeth Moore and play. So what it should do, it should go through all cells within the table one by one and try to locate one with a text Elizabeth Moore and click on it. So the simplest way to interact. In this case, the test script becomes really concise and simple to understand while still powerful. And one good example of non-standard grid also available on our website. If you go to Repeat Samples project, it has a samples dynamic web table. I may download it. Extract from the zip package. Okay, open it in rupees. This one has another grid learned as a grid meta table, as HTML meta table. And you may see that this grid itself is more complicated and it's non-standard. And this example contains the way how we tweaked it to work with that grid. This is a working example, so it should be able to just take information from some dynamic table like you see now on the screen. So it was able to read CPU load information from the table. And the internal design of this table is really tricky. Let me inspect something. You see, it doesn't contain table tag. It's something really complicated using divs with different role settings. So it's something non-standard, but we may still work with it using this HTML meta table object available in libmetatable library. Okay, now let's summarize information about grids. So we reviewed OpenUI grid, which has good support. We also looked at NAV grid, and we also checked the meta table grid that is using external library available in rupees Power Pack, and this library is called libmetatable. And we also checked the external example of how this table is used. What I may say about table and grid API, it's good that if table has do-click cell, and it's not good, it's must have do-click cell and get cell to read information and to click on the grid. This is essential support for grid. It's also good if we can click on the cell using text, not just index, but text of the cell and the column name. And it's very good if we may just click on text by text, find text within the table and click on it. Okay, so we will skip this trend talk. It's more generic. It's about how widgets are changing with time within the industry, and we will summarize this knowledge on one of the next webinars. What's happening? What's going on? My screen is frozen. So I just want to invite you to the next webinar from Parallel Series. It would be performed by my colleague Denis Markovtsev, and it would be devoted to framework for MS Dynamics AX testing. Now, thank you for attention, and I'm looking for your questions. Do we have any?
We do have one question so far,
Okay.
and the question is it possible to export table data to an Excel file? So I think that the question is about if you have a table in the application and you want to export all the data into Excel from this table.
So if the table is well formed and supported as a table by rupees, then there is one utility function that may be used to export it. We need to go to Inflectra GitHub, and I think if we go to the project samples, rupees samples, there is a corresponding sample. So it's example of how to save the table that has essential APIs, APIs like those mentioned here, to the Excel. So if table is supported, then this project contains a useful function. You just need to put it into your project, and it will save your table to the Excel spreadsheet. So you're welcome to use it for your purposes.
Thanks for the answer. Yeah, I think we don't have any more questions.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much, Alexey, for today's presentation. Thank you, Dennis, for assisting with the questions. We will send out an email in a couple of days with a link to the recording for this webinar. We hope that you will join us for the next webinar in the series titled UI Automation Drop-Down Controls, Date Pickers, and Sliders, which is scheduled for Wednesday, April 15th at 10 a.m. If you are interested in the companion MS Dynamics UI testing series, please plan to attend the second in that series called How to Test MS Dynamics AX through the UI like a pro. And that'll be on Wednesday, April 1st at 10 a.m. But until then, thank you, Alexey. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa.
And thanks for watching.